My recollection is Double Helix had taken an option to do several Sleepaway Camp films. I think it was, they had the option to do 2 and 3, and then the contract said something to, you know, additional ones, additional sequels if the rights were available or something. So I knew going in we had a real good shot at doing both. Well, the challenge was Fritz was literally writing 3 while we were shooting 2. So I got pages and I could sort of see where he was going with it, and I knew that it could work on the budget and that sort of thing. But at the same time, just the idea of kind of locking up cast and any kind of prep time. And if I remember correctly, I think we had literally maybe a weekend between the wrap of 2 and the beginning of 3.
In some ways, I think that was one of the things that kind of separated the looks of the 2, was that by the time we got to Sleepaway 3, we were all a little tired, and you know, we were kind of used to the area, so we were looking for new looks out of there. One of the things that stands out to me about Sleepaway 3 was just how many daylight locations we ended up doing. I think that changed the look of the film a great deal. I think 3 had much more of a grunge feel to it.
And people kept saying, "You have lost your mind. How can you create a horror movie in daylight?" But we kept saying, well, if it's scary, doesn't matter whether there's lights or not. But the reason we were shooting during the day was we were moving into fall, and it was getting increasingly cool at night. We were not using the sets that of the buildings at Camp Waco. We were using tents. So these kids, within the context of the story, were supposed to be camping out. So a lot of the sequences that do take place at night are in tents outdoors.
I mean, the cast was all dead at the end except for Angela, so you couldn't, you know, you had to kind of finish with those people, let them all go, and then start with a new group of 15 more campers were going to get slaughtered.
I knew that we were going to do most of the casting in Atlanta, so we had already gotten most of the casting done. I had looked at Tracy originally to play the role of Angela, and I knew she would be great, and I wanted to use her. So in essence, I already had that cast.
Working with Tracy Griffith was a treat. It really was, and playing her love interest was great. We actually developed an on-set romance. Not sure if you're aware of that. Little tidbit for you guys. That didn't last very long, like 2 weeks. You know, I was a wayward youth from Mexico. She was a debutante, and it wasn't meant to be. But no, she was wonderful to work with. She was just a pro and knew her lines down and had that character nailed.
Come on out, sweet pea. Daddy won't make you go fishing if you don't want to, sweet pea.
Michael J. Pollard is one of the few that really stands out. Michael was a real character. He was kind of a poster child for the 70s.
Michael J. Pollard is as crazy in real life as he is on screen. He had an energy about him that I've never encountered before. You never knew what was going to come out of his mouth. You just knew it was going to be something you wanted to hear.
It's just a firecracker. You city brats should be used to that.
Without a doubt, he was the quirkiest actor I've ever worked with. He was a sweetheart of a guy on one level, but he was also just crazy. He was one of those guys just absolutely bona fide, kind of zonked out.
He is one of a kind, there's no doubt. And I was thrilled to be working with him, having seen Bonnie and Clyde. It was one of my favorites. You know, I was glad to work with him. He just was Mr. Improv, more or less. But I think he did a good job for that movie because it was perfect for him, I think.
Somebody came out on the set and said, "You've got to call Michael J.'s mom." And I thought, well, is there something going on? Is something he's, you know, is his family? He said, "I don't know." She says, "You've got to call her, and here's the number." So as soon as we had a break, I went back to the production office and called his mom. And she was like the sweetest lady in the world, but it was like, well, now is Michael eating well? Now you make sure that he's getting enough sleep. I mean, and I thought, wow, okay.
Our second AD, Catherine Murphy, spent a good bit of her time just trying to keep up with Michael, because he would just often wander off and, you know, where's Michael? I don't know, he's in the woods somewhere.
In many ways, he was very childlike, but not, but at the same way, he was, I remember he was hitting on these relatively, especially considering his age, younger women. I mean, they were all of age. I don't want to infer anything differently. These were people who, but I remember he was like coming on to, girls in their 20s there, and I was like, okay. But we had a great time. He's a true original.
Let's meet the kids.
Hello, my name is Cindy Hammersmith from Dunwoody, Georgia.
I was cast as a racist in another movie, Glory Road. What's going on? I'm being typecast.
God, that Tony guy is so cute. He's Mexican.
I did not like that aspect of the character, but I see how it fit with the storyline. So I played it, but I wasn't comfortable with those words because I don't use them. I don't even like racism where people talk about their own ethnicity or race in a degrading way. That bothers me. If someone's Italian and they use like a derogatory term, I'm like, don't do that. And they're like, but I'm Italian. I'm like, I don't care. Just don't do it. It's negative. It encourages other people to be negative with the word. So yeah, I'm sensitive about that.
What I want to know is why do we have to keep from listening to those stupid rap tapes? I mean, who likes that stuff anymore?
Fuck you.
Riff now.
I mean, rap is a hell of a lot better than that country shit. Well, actually, it was a surprise when I got the part of Riff, because I really didn't, identify with Riff that much, because I'm kind of a introverted, nerdy type, and I was actually kind of gravitating and sort of like the character. The guy who got the firecracker up his nose, I thought I was going to get that, and that's the one that I was like looking at. And so it really surprised me when they like, you're gonna play Riff. So I was like, okay, I'll play Riff and pull from whatever background I have to pull off this thug role. So it turned out okay.
What?
All you had to do was focus on having fun, having a good performance. It wasn't Shakespeare and I must suck your dick, spick. It was nothing like that. It was just you went out there and you had a good time, and you didn't focus on it, and make it so serious where, like, oh, what am I doing? It was really, really, really just simplistic fun.
I have a lot of great memories from working on Sleepaway Camp 3. To this day, it's still one of my favorite projects ever to have worked on for numerous reasons. I do remember that most of the crew were musicians, and I play guitar as well, so every night, not just on the weekends, we would all get together for a jam session. And the camaraderie was something I haven't experienced since then. The way, the cohesiveness of the crew and the cast, and everybody just got along. You could feel it in the air. It was a fun set to be on.
Sleepaway Camp 3 was, it was interesting to try to recycle things we had from the other films. There's like points where we use the same fake branches and stuff, and so it's like, oh wow, look, I found the same branch I killed this person with, a couple of years ago or whatever, and we reused them, but we didn't really worry about that stuff so much.
Well, we basically pulled the girl things out of the camp and put in the boy things, and it wasn't a huge redress, but it was just a little bit of whatever their personal things were. We just swapped all that out. But the beds were all the same, and the building structure was the same, and the windows were all the same.
There's a stick where Angela's beating on the character Herman. It's the same stick that was used to shove Valerie Hartman down in the toilet from part 2. And so things like that, they were making their little resurfacing. They were all new heads. It was hard because we had so little time to make things for part 3.
The camp that we shot at has kind of an interesting and sad history. It was shot in Bremen, Georgia, and I can't confirm this, but somebody on set had said that a little boy actually died at that camp 2 years prior to us filming. Yeah, so that was kind of somber. Who knows, maybe she made it up just so we would feel that way while we're shooting. I hope she did.
There was stuff going around that they claimed that there was ghosts there at the location we were filming. And I do remember one specific occasion where one of our crew members was standing out by the flagpole, and she claimed that she felt hands grab her around the ankles. And she looked down and there was nobody there. And I know of other crew members that would be like building sets and stuff, and they'd feel somebody brush by them, like kind of just walk by and, brush them, and they would look and there would be nobody there. So it made it kind of cool because, you know, we're out there filming night and it's kind of a creepy and, you know, deserted environment.
I just don't do exterior shoots well, man, and I can't remember the exact time frame as far as the month, but I know it was either winter or very, very close to winter. So we were up at this camp and it was late at night and it was freezing, it was cold. That's all I remember. That's one of my worst memories if I have a bad memory about it. It's just like when you're on any exterior shoot and, you know, and it's inclement weather or it's just near the fall or winter, it's gonna be cold. So we were up in northern Georgia and we had these big heaters that were blasting out hot air so we could try to huddle around them and stay warm. And I did that a lot. They were always like, "Where's Daryl? Where's Daryl?" And he was like, "Oh, he's probably near a heater."
The temperatures dropped dramatically. I mean, it got really cold really fast, which is why all of a sudden it was rewritten to be a fall time film, because originally I don't think it was planned to be fall.
The weather really became a huge factor. We wrapped on 3 on Halloween day. And so we had a wrap party Halloween night, which was kind of a fun coda to doing 2 horror films back to back.
You know, it may not be the most pleasant environment as in weather-wise and that sort of thing, but just being with those folks and stuff, that it brings very, very warm memories for me to look back on that, and you know, it was great. I mean, I definitely wouldn't trade it for anything.
Hey, you got a problem? Suck my dick, Spick, you motherfucker.
Shooting the fight scene with Daryl was one of the highlights of the whole movie for me. First of all, Daryl's a great actor and just super easy to work with. That scene took us an entire day to choreograph.
Me being the ultimate uncoordinated nerd that I was, I didn't have all of the stereotypes that a black guy wants to have that are positive. I didn't have any of them. I'm not good at basketball. I'm really not athletic. I can't dance. I was just this ultimate nerd. So it was like the ultimate fantasy for me to do a fight scene like all of the scenes that I've seen in movies and everything. And the stunt coordinator was really cool and Mark was great. So we like worked it out and we were like really pumped.
We just gave it our all. When we finally got all the moves sorted out and everything, he and I just looked at each other and said, all right, this is gonna be the one. And that's the take they ended up using.
The sequence where we actually jump on the table and the table is rigged to collapse and we just sort of slide off of it. We had practiced it and rehearsed it and we knew what we were gonna do, and then when we did it and we crashed onto the floor and the scene ended and then it was cut, the director yelled cut, and both Mark and I looked at each other and at the same time we went, "Are you okay?" Because we were both worried about the other, but we were perfectly fine. It was just like kids playing in a sandbox. We had so much fun doing that.
The only scene that I remember in either film that was shot outside of the location of Camp Waco was the scene that opened 3, which was shot in downtown Atlanta.
The victim is like getting dressed, have a little gratuitous nude scene, and then she goes out in the street and is run down by a garbage truck.
I remember Lonnie Smith, who was our stunt coordinator on that, who still I see on shows. He was dressed as Angela, so he had on a wig, the whole bit, which is funny. He's driving this garbage truck.
If you look at it closely, suddenly Angela's character has grown about 6 or 9 inches and weighs now about another 100 pounds. And it was the stunt guy was doing the driving. Obviously, you couldn't have Tammy do something like that. But it's so quickly edited, you have to really be looking at it.
They wanted to show the girl getting hit by the truck. Well, I had a medical dummy I had bought, which was very expensive, and they wanted to hit that with the truck, and I'm like, it was not ever in our agreement, and I'm not so sure I really want to do that because you'd love to destroy this dummy, but we went ahead and did it anyway, and actually it held up really well. I got hit pretty hard, and there was just a little tiny crack in the plastic on there, and I still have that dummy. But yeah, so that actually is probably, of all the effects in the films, that was one of the most effective. But I believe if you look really closely, you can see the head come off the dummy when it gets hit.
We actually had a lot of fun shooting that scene, and it was nice to get out of the woods. As I recall, that scene was probably the last thing we shot. Some of the other scenes in 3 I felt were a little gratuitous just for the sake of having gore. And I don't think we had quite the time and the energy level that we did on 2, just from my recollection of it.
Memorable death scenes, part 3. For Firecracker Face was probably my favorite because I think that was like a pretty cool looking head, and it was pretty disturbing to look at, and I remember that made it in Fango, and I was real excited about that.
So in 1989, when Sleepaway Camp 3 was getting ready to be released, it had to be sent in to the Motion Picture Association of America to get a rating. And unfortunately for the movie, they felt that there was too much gore and too much blood. So they sent it back and they made the editor cut out a bunch of the gore in order to give the film an R rating.
They gave us an X rating again and again. And no matter what we took out, they kept saying X until we obliterated, like, I think there were at least 5 or 6 scenes we had to take out before we got the R rating.
2 got an R with some conversation, but I think my recollection is we appealed and got the R.
When you start creating these graphic effects for death or for a horror scene, it can work at night because sometimes what you don't see is the scariest stuff. But in the daytime, it just becomes graphic. And I think that may be one of the reasons that the ratings issue with 3 took a little longer to get through, was that it was just a little more gory, a little more graphic.
And the 2 that they got really upset about, one was the camp counselor, Sandra Dorsey, her kill with a lawnmower, where she was buried up to her head, and we ran a lawnmower over her head.
The set people dug a big hole in the ground and put a lot of sandbags in there so I could sit on the sandbags. Then they took a 4x8 piece of plywood and then cut out just for my neck on one side and then one side. Then they put on top of the plywood leaves and grass and stuff, so it looked like I was literally buried up to my neck. Well, the fact is, then I had my nose started itching. When you can't scratch your nose or you can't scratch, I was like, what? Because I was there for 5 or 10 minutes anyway.
The lawnmower head was a melon, I think, and put blood in it or something like that, and then they ran over the real lawnmower. So that's how that was done. And then we had my medical dummy was sitting there with the neck stump on it.
I haven't seen the movie in 15 years, I'm sure. And I never watched my demise scene because I never wanted to watch my brains being splattered all over the screen.
That freaked them out completely. And the other one that really freaked them out was Kim Wall's kill. Kim was the character that we ran up the flagpole and then dropped her upside down on her head. And Splat had made a fake head so that we could do a close-up shot of the head that's hitting. And we took and filled it full of pig brains.
I loved being hoisted up the flagpole. It was a lot of fun. It was, I don't know, it was freeing. I would not do that now because it looks like it would be painful. I don't know, it was fun. I enjoyed it. It was silly. We got to do some improv and, oh my gosh, do you know who my dad is and all that stuff.
It was really graphic. I mean, and they just splattered everywhere. And I remember getting a call from Double Helix, who had just gotten a call from the MPA, and they said, "This is an X." And I was going, "Okay, can you tell me what we can do?" Because I was contractually obligated to turn in an R. And I kind of knew where we'd stepped over the line, but of course you won't hear them say it. And they said, "Well, we can't tell you where to cut, but off the record we will tell you the woman who was watching this got physically ill on the flagpole scene."
When Bobby, who is tied to the tree, gets his arms ripped off when the Jeep drives off, they in fact showed his arms getting ripped off and the blood spurting out and everything. And they wouldn't allow that, so they had to cut it out. So now when you see the movie, the Jeep drives off, you hear Bobby scream, and that's it.
Those things that were cut out by the MPAA 27 years ago would fly right through. They'd be like, oh, that's nothing.
A lot of it came down to I feel personally was that a lot of it comes down to your budget of your film. If you're a lower budget film back then, they were harsher on you than if you were a studio. And so I feel that was part of it, because the stupid stuff they would come up with is ridiculous, and there was no set guideline. It wasn't like if you say this or you do that, you're going to get this rating. It was all based on what their feeling was when they saw the movie.
If I could do it again, I would do one thing differently. I would keep the lifts. All those pieces of film that we had to take out for the MPAA, I could have put them all in a box, put them in my closet for 20 years, or 30, or 25 years, and then pulled them out, and we could have put those shots back in for this Blu-ray. I'm very sorry that I didn't do that now. I think what did happen to those shots is they probably were sent to a film warehouse somewhere where after 3 or 4 years, everything gets discarded.
Hey, what's going on back there?
Just taking care of business.
I did immensely enjoy them. It was a point in my life and my career where it made sense to do them. I had small budgets and very limited amount of time to shoot them. I really enjoyed the camaraderie. I had a great cast, great crew. Of the two, you know, I always tell people, no matter what film I've ever worked on, when you start asking about what film you like better, it's sort of like somebody asking you which child do you like better. But of those two films, I think creatively, I think 2 works the best.
My favorite of the 2 is probably part 2. I think part 2 is, because we had a little bit more time on that one. In some ways, part 3 was actually really good to me too, because of the fact that when it got cold, it was just, there was something just fun about the whole experiences of the cold nights and the hot sandwiches, and when things would catch fire, you want to be near it because you're cold, and you know, that kind of stuff. There was just something. It's almost like, you know, going to a camp in real life, you know, where, you know, sometimes the harder the situation, the more fun it is to look back on.
Like most people, I probably favor Sleepaway Camp 2 to 3. Although I've heard there are people who prefer Sleepaway Camp 3.
I have friends in town who have like haunted houses that go up in October. They stay up all year and they do the whole horror thing. And they would tell me, like, these movies are pretty big. There's people following these things. And at that point, I started realizing what kind of following they actually had and their cult status they were establishing.
It was fun, and what's really been fun is the fact that it has become more popular as the years go by. I get fan mail from kids, you know, teenagers in Canada and all over the country, wanting me to send them pictures and autograph pictures and stuff. It's phenomenal to me.
To look back 20, 30 years ago and say, you know, this film was going to be a cult classic, I don't think any of us really had any idea that it had that potential. We had a lot of fun making it, and maybe that came through. I think had it not been for the humor that Pam brought to it, and realistically the entire crew brought to it, it could have just been another, you know, horror film that nobody remembered.
You know, it's funny, but over the years I meet people and I get tons of emails. People discover my email address, and they'll write me things, and it's sometimes very heated and very passionate. I mean, not in a bad way, but and they're very passionate about the first film, or they're very you know, about Robert's work, or they're very passionate about the second one, or they're very passionate about the third one. And sometimes they really love the second one but hate the first one, or they love the first one and hate the third and second one. And I find it in some ways very endearing. I feel blessed, and I'm happy that I did them, and I'm glad that, you know, they have a fan base and they enjoyed the films.